this is a favorite slide that I use in a lot of my presentations because I think ideally, especially in this day and age, we all want to live on what you see here, Pleasant Street. But it's become almost anything but that in most cities across the country, particularly larger centers. And one of the key things, and this is a split screen just so you realize it, is the importance of connection. You know, it's right in our tagline, people, place, connection. And that's really what all of this stuff that I'm talking about today boils down to. And I know we're well beyond the crunch of the pandemic now, but the impacts that have resulted from that period, we're still feeling that. So our health and well-being, the economic impact, homelessness, mental health, and addictions. It had so many impacts. I don't think we realized it until we actually started coming out of that period. So this is a shot of downtown Victoria during the pandemic. And this is one of the primary gathering points in downtown Victoria. It's a square where there's, like, you would never go down there on any given day and not see probably at least 50 to 100 people, if not more, and just all the hustle and bustle. So it was very bizarre times. And of course, the social challenges that we still face, crime and social disorder, homelessness, mental health, and addictions, all are affecting cities throughout the country. I haven't been to Kenora, I'll tell you that right up front, but I'm so looking forward to visiting. I'm not sure if you're dealing with encampments there, but a lot of the municipalities and different places I've been or worked in over these last few years, there's been an escalation and really some serious issues around encampments as well. So I did say that I'd focus on second generation, but the key point, I guess, that I want to make before I get into second generation is first generation. And certainly when I'm out, we'll be using all the tools in our tool belt, so to speak. I'm sure Christian's used that term as well, our tool belt. So the easiest way, I guess, to think of first generation is to think of the physical built environment. So there's some very key principles in first generation. So you've got natural surveillance. So that would more or less just being able to have good visibility around our public spaces and different areas, to be able, I often say, to be able to see in and out of areas. You know, one of the things that's always interesting, because I work with a lot of architects, planners, engineers, and we're trying to essentially design out crime before we even build something new. And natural surveillance is just one of the principles, but it's so underestimated in that we're commonly thinking about our public spaces outside, but CPTED can be used internally within a premises or a facility as well, right? We started seeing this a number of years ago when there was some major incidents, and I'll use Edmonton as a good example because there was recently just an incident at Edmonton City Hall where there was one single male came in and started shooting. So no injuries, thank goodness. But one of my friends who's in corporate security said they immediately started doing risk and CPTED analysis of the inside space, because there's different elements that can be used to improve the area. So there's territoriality, access control, maintenance and activity support are two supporting principles as well. But what we'll focus on today, because I think it's so important, is the second generation principles. And the beauty of first and second generation is that I've always argued, with colleagues about how this is linked and how critical it really is to understand that link between first gen and second, because I don't believe that we can go into any of our spaces, particularly in a public space, without having some type of a relationship with that space. And I'll maybe build on that a little bit when I'm talking about placemaking. But ideally, when you go to a public place, you want to enjoy that space, you want it to be safe. And generally speaking, if you've really enjoyed being in that space, if it's well designed, it's safe, you will go back. The other interesting thing is around tourism, right? Because, as more and more people are starting to travel again, they want to visit different places, but essentially they want to be safe and enjoy it as well. So I've got what we call the 4 C's up here on the screen. And even if you just look at those words, you start to make some assumptions, and they're probably in most cases correct. But I'll give you the textbook definitions, so to speak. Social cohesion is critical to intentionally create a wide range of activities that build relationships. Placemaking, again, supports this social cohesion. Every community has some type of a culture, so we need to be able to support that. Threshold capacity is an interesting one, because the easiest way to think about tipping points is, and again, when I teach or when I lecture at universities and such, I love to use examples, but one of the best examples is an area in Red Deer where I used to live, where there were, I believe at one point, 6 liquor stores within 6 blocks. You couldn't walk a block, without seeing a liquor store. So as the RCMP or local police services and bylaw probably even would realize, this can create issues. So when we're doing CPTED assessments, this is just another thing we look at. Connectivity is just building networks that bring people together, but it can also be, you can also look at it from the physical standpoint, as far as pathways connecting, so to speak, and bringing people together. And again, all of this ties in to placemaking as well, which is what I'm going to touch on here right now. So this is a friend of mine. She's an incredible artist, and we had her do a number of watercolor images for us for some of our marketing and workshops and such. And so when you look at this picture, you will notice a couple of things. You'll definitely see people. You'll see people sitting. You'll see somebody playing the street piano there. There's places to sit down, have a coffee. You'll see the police officer on the other side. He's knelt down, talking to, could be someone who's homeless, could be somebody who's just sat down and decided to have a coffee, but he's getting down to their level to have a conversation with them. So placemaking can be, well, I can tell you it's a lot of fun because I've been doing it for years, but it really can have a dramatic impact. This was just a really small little, what we called pocket project in downtown Victoria, where we closed off a small section of the street. You'll see what, there's a lot of stuff on it, but there's a ping pong table there. There's some seating. We're doing some painting. And I can tell you that this was one of the spaces that was identified as somewhat problematic in downtown Victoria, and there just was not enough what we call activity support. I just spoke to that a few minutes ago, one of the supporting principles of first generation CPTED. So you want to bring people to a space to enjoy that space. And what better way of resolving issues in what we often refer to as a hotspot or a problematic area than to activate that space? We definitely, unless you're an artist or a musician, and I'm neither, although I work a lot with them, we all want to tap in to our creativity. And when cities do that, when communities do that, it's a win-win situation. So this inventor, Nathan here, he worked for Microsoft, and he said, if you don't fashion an environment where creators and originators can get things going, you won't have any new ideas. And it really is that simple. This is a great example of Art Alley, a big mural project that I managed in Red Deer for about 5 years. This was an unbelievably problematic laneway, or as we often refer to them as back alleys, where there was drug dealing, loitering, lots of different types of social issues. You know, you would find people urinating in the alcoves. It was just nobody went down there. And yet, when we transformed that space with one single mural, which, by the way, was one of the largest murals in Red Deer, this probably, well, it does run for almost half a block. It's a massive building, and you're only seeing a couple of the musicians in the background there. But the backstory behind this is that following that mural, it was a game changer. So everybody started coming down to see this mural. This is a local dance troupe that decided to do some filming down there. So it was no longer one of these problematic areas of downtown Red Deer or a hotspot. It just changed it, you could almost say, overnight. This artist's name is Brian Usher. He's in California now. I got to know Brian over a few years because he worked with me on the Art Alley project. But you see him there putting his hand and his brush to a street piano that we purchased for another hotspot in downtown Red Deer, which, you know, eventually became the Ross Street patio, where 2 lanes were closed off. It's year round now. They use that patio year round. I believe this weekend they're doing some ice sculptures and such, and it just was a game changer again. You know, you've got all these people congregating on the patio, families bringing down their children to play on the street piano. It was just wonderful to see. Something, and I'm not sure if you're doing them in Kenora or not, is Jane's Walk. So the Jane Jacobs was an urbanist, an incredible writer. If you've read any of her books, I'm a big fan. And one of her favorite quotes of mine was to get out of Theoryland and get into the streets for a closer look. So usually every year in May, there's what's called Jane's Walks are held around the world. And I would get small groups of people out and just take them around downtown Victoria or downtown Red Deer, wherever I was living at the time, and talk about some of the things that I'm sharing with you here today. So essentially what we've done is we've taken a number of methodologies, which we've only really just touched on briefly this morning, and called it full spectrum community safety and well-being. And you can see some of the key points here, but it expands the scope of traditional engagement. It's definitely a lot more creative and people-centered. It builds on decades of field work and academics, creates the space for people to connect with social, cultural, and economic capabilities of their community. It is what I refer to often as just a fusion of best practices. So you've got CPTED, placemaking, HBE, if you're wondering what that is, it stands for Healthy Built Environments. Very big in both BC and Alberta, and I suspect that your local health networks or people out east are also using it to some degree. Restorative practices, I've already touched very briefly on arts and culture, and we also use sharing circles, which I was trained in when I worked with the Alberta government around gang reduction. So it's a very well-balanced approach that provides communities with a ton of resources to address safety, certainly address crime and disorder, embrace culture, and support some of those second-generation principles that we spoke of. If you want to use a visual in its simplest way, this is exactly our approach. We use CPTED, health impact, which is an assessment process, placemaking, which leads into this full spectrum approach. Now, I really thought it might be helpful if I just talked for a few minutes or shared with you, because you can do some research on your own on this, about some noteworthy cities that I really think are leading the way for us in some of these areas. And we've worked in all of these areas. City of Kelowna now has a CPTED cohort. We've done a number of courses with them. I believe they've got about 45 municipal staff from different departments that make up that CPTED cohort. Chilliwack recently, I guess in the last couple of years, came up with a resolution to embed some of the CPTED principles into the land use bylaws, which is always fantastic to see, because you know that any developer or anybody wanting to do any type of construction or development in your community is going to have to adhere to those CPTED principles. City of Nanaimo, we did a lot of work up there last year around gang reduction, as well as trained all of their community safety officers and a number of other staff. So they also have a CPTED cohort. I bring up City of Victoria, not so much because, you know, the city itself has been rather slow. Christian can certainly, you know, attest to this in picking up the ball on some of this stuff, particularly around CPTED. But one of the game changers for the City of Victoria is a good dear friend of mine, Lauren Daniel, who's also part of the Rethink Collaborative. He started years ago what's called the Greater Victoria Placemaking Network, and it's strictly volunteer-based. And they do all types of pocket projects or street activations, which we were talking about briefly earlier. Already mentioned Art Alley and City of Medicine Hat, unbelievable murals. Like, you can't even walk half a block in Medicine Hat without seeing a mural. So I thought I'd just mention a few of those places. Always on everybody's mind, especially government, is return on investment, and that definitely is something to consider here. When you start implementing CPTED, especially at the planning and development stage, you will start to see a return on investment. And I can't argue enough that local police and bylaw will be able to take a sigh of relief as well as you start activating some of these problematic areas and doing assessments in those areas. Collaboration, which clearly you're already doing, and I'm not sure how much of that you've been doing over the years, but it's absolutely critical these days. And there's just so many different groups you know, that you're able to collaborate with. I would highly recommend being part of CPTED Canada. We've got our first inaugural conference coming up on April 25th in Toronto, which I'm looking forward to attending. numerous groups and services. I'll mention Greater Victoria Placemaking Network again, which was local to Victoria, but your local police plays a huge role in all of this type of work. And resources, you're already tapped into the Canadian Centre for Safer Communities through Christian, but there's lots of other ones as well. It's interesting that you already have a community of practice, because this is a slide I use in all of my training and workshops. So in my opinion, you're already on what I'm calling this new pathway, or you're hoping to create this new pathway towards safer communities. And, you know, there's huge payoffs from a health and well-being perspective as well, as I'm sure we all know. Crime and social disorder, homelessness, mental health, and addictions are all serious issues that every city across our country is facing right now. So I think I'll leave it at that, and we'll take some questions. I'll stop sharing my screen here in a minute. I just want to say that I'm always open to a quick email. If there's something that piqued your curiosity today, fire me an email at steve@rethinkurban. We're on social media as well. And yeah, let's take some questions.